Kia ora, everybody. My name's Asha Andersen, and I'd like to welcome you back to another meaningful conversation with my very good friend, Barbara Belger. Today, we are going to talk about resilience. Barbara is a resilience coach with a lot of experience in health and trauma. So really, really lovely to see you again, Barbara, and to have this conversation that we've been wanting to get around to, because resilience is just such an important focus for us at the moment. So welcome.
Kia ora, Asha. So good to see you again and be here in this space with you again. Love it. I love our meaningful conversations.
Yeah, me too.
And kia ora, everybody out there. It's a beautiful day here in Northland again. Warm, hot. Yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
Great.
Where will we start?
Well, this morning I was reflecting a little bit and re-listening to one of our very first conversations, which was on the 5 stages of grief. And that really, I think, resilience connects very deeply into that whole process. This is a process that you have to go through, and it's not a scientific one necessarily, and it's different for everyone, but yeah, I can see this conversation following on from that. So for anyone who's watching, if you're interested in our earlier conversation on the stages of grief, I'll pop a link in the description below. But it might just help for us to define kind of resilience before we get started. And we'd like to break this up, start the discussion on personal resilience, individual personal resilience. And then if we have time, we're going to make another shorter video on community resilience, which is the next level. So what is resilience? What does it mean to be resilient? Share some?
I love it that we break that up into personal and then community, and that's a really good idea. Thank you, Asha. A while ago, I recorded a video with a friend of mine down in Auckland, and we spoke about some processes that people can, some practices that people can put into place to bounce back. At the time, I mentioned to her that resilience is something. It's a quality inside you that allows you to bounce back no matter what. It's not. I was also pondering this morning a little bit what we could touch on today, and there is a big difference. I'm sure we all know people who are just always fine. They're always fine, and there's a fine balance between denying, which is one of the stages of grief and trauma, and denying and just say, yeah, everything is okay. And they seem to just move on the surface of things. They're just so afraid to get in touch with feelings, especially negative feelings like sadness or anger or deep passion. That's just all too scary. Don't get me there. And so that's those people, and without judgment, but it's like a shallow kind of between all the choices of emotions that people can choose from. I heard a figure at some stage, 4,000 emotions that we're able to feel. They just access to, So that is, they would probably say that they're resilient. I wouldn't call it resilience. And from my experience, from doing this work for nearly 20 years now, at some point, the body keeps score. Something shows up in the body that is just something not processed. So the body always keeps the score. And then it's the other side of people deeply feeling. And I think where the difference is awareness.
Yes.
And self-awareness. And like mindfulness, become aware of where you're at and what you're experiencing, and then develop strategies how to process.
Yes.
Yeah. And as far as emotions are concerned, we do process emotions. They go through us. It's just when they get stuck, then we should really take some time and actually pay attention to them. But yes, so deeply feel and have a deep sensation of something, and then get up again. And usually, I would say that after an experience, especially after deeply felt experience, we get up stronger.
Yes.
So yeah, it's not walking away from things and denying, but actually go right through it. And I'm sure you and I know when we have our time out, it's just,
Yes.
I just close doors and windows and just take time out and just be by myself, or do something where I can just process, have a whole day of processing, maybe meditation. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that resonates with me a lot, and definitely a few of the keywords are the words that I've been thinking about as well. So to be resilient, yeah, when you experience a shock, an injury, a trauma, some kind of blow, a loss, then your ability to be able to deal with that and recover. And it's not necessarily about speed, time is definitely a factor. It's so, and what you were mentioning was about people, some people maybe actually don't feel into their experience and try to recover, but in a sense, there's a kind of burying and a non-feeling of what's happened, and that's not ideal, because then the growth and the lessons and the learning and the furthering, and the healing, doesn't necessarily take place. So being able to fully feel what's happened, as you said, in your physical being, and in your emotional being, in your mental being, in your spiritual being, and develop an awareness that something's happened, something overwhelming may have happened, and that you're experiencing that, and that you perhaps are able to step back from it a little bit and be gentle with yourself, and just recognize that this loss has occurred, or this injury has occurred, and there is a process to go through to heal from that, and to learn, I suppose. A lot of times with these challenges that come up into our lives, are for our own learning potential. And I think it's so important two things really come to mind for me. There are always going to be challenges in our lives, and I think we need to know and expect, in a sense, to know that challenges, whether it's dealing with grief from the loss of a family member, or whether it's dealing with an injury that's a major setback for you, or your job being lost, that these kind of things are always going to come up in our lives. So our ability to be aware of what we're feeling when it happens, and to be aware that we can always move through these things. They're not an end point. So, we can feel into what we're feeling and be gentle with ourselves, and recognize that we might need to nurture ourselves quite a bit more during that time. Like you just said, sometimes we just feel we need to rest. You might really feel at times you need to take a deep rest, or even withdraw, for a certain period. And that's not a bad thing. That can be a very healing thing. When the turning point, when it becomes somewhat of a negative thing, is when, as you said before, when you get stuck. Yeah. When you get stuck in it and you can't see, your way out of it, and you really just get stuck in that one emotion or in that one mindset. So being able to shift through things and come out the other side stronger, So I think over time we develop resilient skill sets from childhood, just from dealing with challenges and adverse things that might happen in our lives. So increasing that skill set and always just being aware. Things, life goes up and down. People in your life are always going to pass away at some point. There are always going to be these challenges, and it's how we're able to recognize that we're in that state, we're in a challenged state, and how to help guide ourselves through it. Yeah.
There's there are two things that come to mind. We may have talked about this before, Asha, you and I. What I notice while in general with clients, but the first time I really noticed was in the earthquake trauma work in Christchurch.
Yeah.
That some people bounced back. They were deeply disturbed. They had all the symptoms of a traumatized person. And then after 2-3 days, they bounced back, whereas others stayed. They just stayed. And then, I suppose you could call it PTSD and whatever. And that is something I think that goes, you develop resilience at childhood. So I would almost say the safer your attachments are, caring parents, nurturing environment, where as a baby you just have the chance to be, that naturally leads to high levels of resilience. Because then the little traumas happen, but you always have a chance to fall back onto yourself. Whereas if you're like right from birth, maybe a traumatic birth experience or events in your early childhood that are deeply, deeply disturbing. It's like I heard the comparison once of it being a pendulum. The pendulum goes one way and it can only stay up so long before it falls back and then goes to the other side. And it's a little bit like that. So you'll fall back into your own equilibrium. But if it's too much in one direction, and that's where people's resilience, personal resilience, decrease, I think. So I once was in a conversation with district council about emergency housing and tools, how to give more people more tools, how to deal with events like in the earthquake. And the chief psychiatrist said, we can't save the whole world. I said, well, today would be a good day to start. If people knew how important, for example, birth events are, and how with just a few basic understandings, you could create a whole different basis for a young child, to grow up, and the consequences it has for later in life. But yeah, so that's one thing. I think that you can form resilience. You can return to resilience if you do, like we are all, we've all gone through our self-help programs or personal development, or then you can return to your resilience. You can reestablish that, I believe.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to talk about is triggers, becoming aware of triggers.
Yes.
What is it that triggers you? And that is something not many people know about. What is it that that little spark that brings you back into a certain state, an emotional state, in being, and you respond or you react the same way as you always did. So that those are moments where you can evolve from that. If you have this, how come I react like that? And then I would like to choose to respond in a different way. But yes, trigger, and then of course trigger, you go into the five senses. It can be a kinesthetic or a visual trigger or an auditory trigger or smell or taste. All your five senses one of them can be a trigger. A certain necktie that the abusive teacher was wearing, and suddenly somebody walks into the room and has the same kind of necktie, and it's out of your awareness, but suddenly your being, your state shifts. As an example. So yeah, always opportunities for more healing.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, on the more extreme end, for somebody perhaps who has had their whole world shift by a traumatic event, not necessarily as a child, say perhaps as an adult, it's like the world is pulled out from under you, and you lose your solid ground. And what would have you got any suggestions, on what the small things that might help that person to start to kind of recover themselves? For me, grounding, is just, you kind of add these things into your toolkit, your resilience toolkit, the little things that you do to nurture yourself and reconnect yourself back on a deeper spiritual level. And then also, your physical, emotional, and mental aspects need, extra love and care.
You mentioned the word love, and that is so very much more powerful than we are actually. It's not this romantic little thing. Love is just such a deeply felt emotion. It's very interesting with how we do the heart meditations sometimes at the opening of our crop swap. And it's interesting that in this crisis, so many people's heart is affected by things. And yet it's one of the most important organs. It's much more than an organ, but it's such an important impulse giver to actually connect to everybody else and everything else. But yeah, so grounding. Maybe later you'd like to share some of your strategies how to ground.
Yep.
Walking can be simple as, for me, walking barefoot. If you're lucky, like we are here in New Zealand, there's always a coastline nearby. You can just step into some sea water, which is great. Cold showers, for example. Cold showers are really good to practice, to increase your resilience. And also, in the first instance, before reacting in a situation, that's a practice. Just take a breath and breathe in and breathe out, and wait what wants to arise, and then respond from that. That is, in interaction with others. So that is definitely something. Again, I always think start with awareness. An attitude of curiosity helps. If even just asking, oh wow, that's interesting how I'm just feeling now, and that allows a certain balance to be reestablished. Yeah.
Definitely.
So there's quite a few steps that you can take.
Yeah, well, just tying it back and maybe adding a few more to that. Yeah, I suppose, you know, when you do go through a severe traumatic event, or perhaps not a severe one, but something that triggers you, you know, it's your nervous system that is in a heightened state, and sometimes, probably often, it's actually that needs to calm down before you start to feel that sense of ease. So a lot of these techniques, really, grounding, barefoot grounding, walking in nature, going for a swim in the ocean, focusing on your breath, you know, meditation, nurturing yourself with good food and water, and minerals. These are all things that are just helping to reset. You know, massage, yoga, all of that stuff just helps to shift perhaps the trapped emotions and calm down that nervous system so that you can begin to actually function properly. So definitely for me, I'm going for a walk in the forest, spending time with my dog, lying in the sun. You know, the elements are incredibly powerful healing tools that, you know, are around us here for us to use. So I think, you know, reconnecting on an elemental level and allowing yourself to deeply relax and calm your nervous system down is just so incredibly important in terms of helping you shift, you know, and just move through what you're experiencing. And of course, developing that awareness of what am I actually feeling? What am I feeling? What can I feel in my body? What am I feeling in my heart? You know, and for me, another thing that really stands out is faith and trust that I know I will get through this. I know that this too shall pass. And while it might be uncomfortable now, and I'm finding my way through it, I know that I will get to a better place. And as you said before, you know, I will be better equipped. You know, my toolbox will be expanded. I will have had this experience and I will have got through it. And yeah, and better things are coming.
You're so right. You mentioned a few things that are we should really write a little notebook about this, or and offer it for people, or people just have to come back to this video. What I also we're always evolving as humans, and we always have, and every crisis is an evolutionary process, and is as we said before, it's an opportunity to evolve. And thinking that this is not the case is ludicrous. Likewise, disease is like that. It's an evolutionary process, and the body naturally wants to evolve to be better equipped for next time. And so that is a physical, and that's also a mental process.
And spiritual.
Yeah. Spiritual, absolutely. And that is that you mentioned nervous system. We are quite a bit more than just this physical being. So when it comes to noticing or like suddenly having a sad day or an experience that we can't quite grasp, we also pick up other people's stuff if we want. And I know we have talked about this many times, where we just, it's inexplicable what's happening and suddenly we hear the news of something happening in the world, and it's a big tragic event of some sort, and that's just what we picked up in our own being, you know. So that's also important to become aware of. What I find helps also, like in my work with clients, I always show them the vagal ladder, and you know where they are on a nervous system vagal ladder scheme, and maybe we can somehow, I don't know, maybe give people the access to the image of this vagal ladder, and then kind of calibrate. That also helps. In some of the energy psychology work, they call it sudden units of distress, SUD. So just calibrate from 1 to 5. You know, like pain, it works really well with pain. So from 1 to 5, how painful is this right now? And first of all, that brings you into the present moment, and also shows you that things are indeed moving. Because if you then come back to that same experience in an hour and just from 1 to 5, where is it now? It will have shifted. Even that just helps, especially like if you work one-on-one with someone like me. Yeah, because it also with emotions or with people's state, it can also develop into, let's say, a habit, or it becomes your behavior, you know. And if you want to shift a certain habit or a behavior, then it's really, really important to know that, first of all, that is possible.
Yes.
And approach this with a great deal of awareness.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, just before we finish up, have you got? I know you had a process that you like to follow that you might like to share with people. And I think that's one of the, you know, when you have the awareness of the fact that you've been through something traumatic, and what you're, you know, what you're feeling may be very overwhelming, and you're trying to deal with it. Having, you know, being aware that that's happening, and then having some steps that you can follow. And this is not you know, hard and fast and everyone has to do it this way. You know, we're each, you know, have to feel into this ourselves and know what's, you know, what we each need at any moment. But it is really good to have the process. So do you want to share what you had written down?
Yeah, so yeah, a three-step process that is easy to recall. And I'll go into, because we don't have so much time now, just touch on it vaguely. So first of all, like we said before, is assess.
Yep.
Step 1. So what is going on? Just assess that, just with curiosity. Or like, I always find journaling helps. You can write things down, that so you can almost have your own checklist. I bring a little bit beside the point, but in Japan, I lived in Japan for 4 years, and at the, you know, the fast trains, Shinkansen. The conductors, they have a process. They have, I don't know, a checklist of 8 steps or something, and you can see them standing on the side. So they point, this is correct, towards that, as you know. And then when all those steps are ticked off in their mind, then they blow the whistle and the Shinkansen goes off. And that is developing that helps for yourself. In a journal, assess, you know, when this happens, then I react like that. Some questions are really unuseful to ask in a crisis situation, such as why, you know, why does this always happen to me? That is, in that first instance, that really is not a very useful question. But first assess just what actually is going on. It helps to also let go of control. We've become so used to have control over everything in our lives. And that is simply almost not possible. Just some things are just the way they are. The only thing you can control is yourself, right? So assess is the first step. It helps. I always think it helps to actually plan ahead. I'm a mental health support worker, and one process we go through with people is a wellness recovery plan. I think in general, people should always have a wellness recovery plan. You know, who's looking after your clients in case you can't show up? Who's watering my plants? Who is taking care of my dog? Or who has access to my bank account? Or whatever. It just helps to be prepared and have a. It also is really, really soothing for the mind to come back to something like that. You know, when something shocking happened, that okay, so I had this plan once. Let's see whether any of these steps can help. The example is always Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark wasn't built when it started to rain. It was built way before that. And then the second step is shift. Like in a crisis, it's like the physical symptoms are, you know, rabbit in the headlight. You know, like your focus is, your eyes are focused, your peripheral vision disappears. It's a complete panic. So that's where, like you said before, breathe, connect to your heart, just time out. Also, just look around. If you have any familiar faces that you see, that helps. That really helps to soothe your whole nervous system. If not, then maybe a phone call if that's possible, or nature. Just look out into the world, connect to something out in the world that is familiar. That shifts. I was standing at the supermarket the other day, Asha, and the ladies were all struggling with their masks on, and I could see how they were breathing with the mouth open. And I said, ladies, you don't do yourself any favors breathing like that. The breathing is smell the flowers, breathe, blow out the candle. They all the people around the checkout went smelling the flowers, blowing out the candle. And so the longer out breath creates a shift, a nervous system shift. Havening, there's a technique, havening. So if you don't have access to somebody, like you mentioned massage before, or any touch, human touch is very, very important for us. Yes. If you don't have access to that, even rubbing your hands, or stroking down your arms, that instantly gives your nervous system the ability to shift.
Yes.
So shift could go on forever here. Breathing out with a sigh actually is even better, even stronger. And we do this naturally, you know, when we come home from work and we just go, you know, and that really, really helps. Yeah. So assess, step 1. Step 2, shift. And step 3 is practice. So practice strengthening your vagal tone, like we said, cold shower, or the Wim Hof method, ice bath.
Yeah.
Sing. My mom was super healthy most of her life. She passed away at age 96. And I don't know, for I think 50 years or so, she sang in a choir.
Wow.
And and she had suffered immense trauma during war time, and being in, growing up in Pomerania, and then becoming a refugee. And so there were certain triggers right to the very end that would always set her off, like hearing fire sirens, or airplanes flying over was really triggering. But because she sang a lot, she always regained balance.
Yes,
and she had a really super beautiful voice. Like we said, practice also create the wellness recovery plan. And then when you go through these first two steps and then go into practice, now is the time to address the bigger picture. What have I learned from this? There's always learning. Of every experience. If you look back, even the worst events in your life, you learn something from it. And so bring this forward as if possible, while you're still going through all these processes, including the grief process, that will be difficult, but you'll if you get a bit of a helicopter view of yourself, you are in the process of learning something. So even shifting from why does this always happen to me, you could ask yourself, what is happening for me here? And so that helps. And those are just practices. Work with a good coach or therapist, like trauma strategies, EMDR, which I use, or the NLP trauma process, EFT tapping. You mentioned massage. Craniosacral is a beautiful therapy form. Acupuncture, and then practices that you can do for yourself: qigong or tai chi, yoga.
Anything that you find soothing and nurturing for yourself, and that's why all of these things are so brilliant and they work, is because they relax the nervous system. Things like singing uplift the spirit, and so it's about just really helping when you're at your lowest, acknowledging, trying to understand what's happening to you physically, emotionally and spiritually, and taking steps that to nurture yourself and to get yourself back to a good state.
And nutrition, we mentioned nutrition before, and nutrition also for me includes supplementation. So knowing that omega-3s or hemp seed oil, good fatty acids, they help your nervous system. They help all the neurotransmitting processes in your brain.
Exactly.
Hydration, I just see you with the water bottle. Hydration is very important. Vitamins, minerals,
magnesium.
So I have my mineral drops that I put in my bottle of drinking water. And have a look at your hormonal balances. Maybe ashwagandha, a colleague of mine always calls it the herbal hug. Ashwagandha, which is nice. Vitamin B, the whole range of the Bs is great for stress and energy levels. So there's plenty of things you can do. Shall we just finish off by repeating? Step 1, assess. Step 2, shift. ASP. Steps 2, shift, and step 3, practice. And so that is a tiny little look into what we can do to improve our resilience.
Great. Will you share any links with me in regards to some of the, maybe something about the vagal ladder, and we'll pop it in the description. But that leads us on now to our next discussion. So you can watch this next video if you like. We're going to have a quick chat about community resilience. So we'll see you in the next video.